You were recognised last year as B&T's 30 Under 30 Entrepreneur of the Year and Mumbrella's 30 Under 30 Achiever of the Year. What do those accolades mean to you, other than making you uncomfortable?
I've just like sat up straight. I feel really, they mean everything to me because it's a byproduct of the team of people that have put trust in me. They deserve that recognition. Yes, I brought it back to team.
Well done.
Which you could probably work out pretty fast that I would do. But they mean a lot because I've done a lot of hard work for myself as well. I work on myself extremely hard. And not everyone would see that every day. It's often the moments that people don't see that I'm working the hardest. Yeah. And I am super grateful for those, but I'm grateful because the people around me wouldn't have allowed those things to be possible either. Bullfrog's trajectory wouldn't have been possible without that team that I've spoken so much about today. However, I just think they're moments of recognition of great work, and I run a team of people that do exceptional work because they care a hell of a lot. Yeah. And so I am very grateful for those things. Those things build our brand. They build credibility. I am lucky to be, just 31 now, but equally to have everything that I have in life at my age is not lost on me for a second. Yeah. And that equally goes for my beautiful wife and partner too, been in my life and her own successes with Kick. And I'm super grateful for imparting those things and sharing that knowledge where it makes sense to share. Yeah. And those recognition points are a byproduct purely, as I said before, of a team believing the same thing together and achieving really great things. So, yes, it makes me feel uncomfortable because I don't like talking about myself. But I do reflect on those and I do say you've done the work to deserve them too. Absolutely. But I also am a big believer in nothing is deserved. You just have to plan and prepare and it'll get the outcome it does deserve. And if you do that to a level, your own personal level that makes sense, sometimes you can be recognised for certain things. Yeah.
How do you feel about the ad awards landscape? And I ask this purely because I feel like every time I see an announcement on LinkedIn, there's always such a mixed response in the comments of like, oh, they've created another like segment of awards for this, or oh, it's sponsored by this person. Of course that person took it out, blah, blah, blah. How do you feel about it?
As someone that is obviously, I'm very much in the industry now, but 4 years ago, I saw them as key beats of marketing and brand building, more so, and still look at it in parts. But they play a critical role of rewarding team success as well, and individual successes and brilliance too. Regardless of who's sponsored by them, they're really hard to win.
Of course.
If you look at some of the ones that, for the last few years, back-to-back, we've been acknowledged as the top 5 Victorian agency, top 5 independent agency. All these things, they're brilliant, but to be in the top 5 is really hard to do. And that's not lost on me for a second either because it's so competitive. However, I think I'm more motivated by awards that show team success. Sure. Even though that you've called out some individual ones that show team success that equally talk to the impact of the work that we've made. Sure. I'm more proud of a finalist in AFR's Most Innovative Companies for our work through Fair Advantage, which is, our pro bono residency and female fund for female founders. Or I'm more proud of Effectiveness Awards because they've had tangible commercial impact on the companies that we work for. But I'm also super proud of getting a Guinness World Record for a hairy suit.
Amazing.
Which, sometimes those out-of-the-box ideas, they did have a commercial benefit for the likes of, in that case, politics and Movember. Yeah. However, I think I'm more motivated by things that show actual genuine impact. Yeah. And I think often, unfortunately, awards are done for awards' sake that actually is a detriment of the client and the partner. And it's seen as, to the point, as a momentum builder for the business or the agency at the detriment of the client, which I fundamentally, wholeheartedly have never believed in. Yeah. And there is only something worthy of, putting in there if the results are truly exceptional. Yeah. I'm grateful that we've been recognised in some of these shows and award shows, but we're only recognised because of our brilliant partners, our people, and knowing that, we've actually created something pretty exceptional.
Yeah.
And it has to be at that standard because you can't just enter everything.
Yeah.
And they are hard to win. They are hard to get. But I equally think they play a role, but I think you just got to make sure you're sharing why we're doing it or why we're entering it for the right reasons. And it has to make sense, not just to the agency per se, but also to your client partners because they're the one fueling that journey too. Yeah. And often it's done at the detriment of them, which I fundamentally, it's ridiculous. So,
yeah. Now, I want to go back to leadership for a second because I know we've spoken a lot about like people first and your team and everything like that. I think one of the things that I'm acutely aware of is that there's a lot of rhetoric at the moment. I'm 32 and there's a lot of rhetoric as a single woman in the industry, don't have kids. I am constantly asked when I'm going to have a family, which I just think is a completely different conversation that we could probably speak about for hours. I am aware and acutely aware of the fact that, there's a lot of conversation around, women taking time off to have kids and, it being detrimental to, their career and all of that. One of my beliefs is that I actually think having a bad manager for 12 months to 18 months to 2 years, for however long you have that manager, is far more detrimental than a woman taking leave to have a child. Yet it's not being spoken about, right? There is certain management or leadership that gets tolerated, and tolerance is a form of accepting.
Yeah.
So I know you spoke about before hiring people and hiring leaders when it comes to having similar values and things like that. But a lot of the times you don't or you can't tell how that person manages somebody until they're in it. So do you have anything that you currently use at Bullfrog or have used in the past in terms of making sure that that person is going to treat people or says what they do on the tin kind of thing? Or is it just a matter of getting them in, figuring it out and getting them out if it's not right?
It's a bit of both. But why I smile to that answer, because sometimes it's sort of the antithesis of sometimes what the team expect of me. But I'm very routine and rigor driven. And one thing that has allowed Bullfrog to grow is our foundations have been really strong in our systems, processes and belief. Now, when it comes to people, every individual has a development plan at every level. Every individual undergoes team surveys, 360 reviews. One of the biggest things that has been super grateful to the point of focusing on people is knowing where people stand all the time and validating that consistently. They have monthly check-ins, weekly check-ins with their line managers, monthly check-ins with our head of people and their line managers, quarterly deep dives into their performance based on their annual plan. The rigor of those check-ins create a forum to share expectation of each other, because it's a two-way street always. And that often catches out on both sides, depending if the manager's wrong or the employee's not meeting expectations, or on both sides, you can often quickly see the care and energy from a leader perspective into the appreciation of rigor often defines the outcome of that person's growth. So I completely agree with you. A really bad line manager or manager in general can really impact someone's growth substantially. And sometimes, often, unfortunately, we've found people come in and it's like, I just thought that's how it's always been done, so I accepted that. And now I've got a new, wow, this is amazing, which is a great feedback to hit, but it isn't always amazing and we do get it wrong, let's be clear. But when you have that rigor and foundations in process around people and a clear people strategy, which we have from pretty much start to exit, and you have to be okay to say that word as well, because we're not going to be for everyone forever. That's myself included. I don't believe I'll be the CEO forever either. But when you have those strong foundations, you have a strategy in place for how you manage your people and their experience from every step of the process. Those check-ins create a forum for consistency, but they also create a forum for validation on people. Are they meeting the benchmark? Do they have more to grow? Then ultimately, when it comes to pay increases, promotions, it's really crystal clear within our team when people have ticked all those boxes. And that sort of comes back to, that sort of comes back to not creating ambiguity about where people stand.
Yeah.
And that rigor allows for that, and that process allows for that. And while sometimes, to the point of why I was laughing at the start, I'm a big blue sky thinker.
Yeah.
And detail, I love detail, as I said, but often I'm like, well, we'll get there. We'll just work out these bits together. I won't have them all planned out because I love to collaborate with my team and my people, because I don't dictate the answer. I want to build the answer together. Some parts, of course, that's my job. But within reason, I'm very collaborative. And that's to the point of what I said earlier, sometimes creates ambiguity. But when you have strong processes, it eliminates that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing that you should be doing, or one thing we've done really well to your question is we've created rigor around how people know where they stand at all times.
Yeah.
Once, yes, you can hire sometimes the wrong people in leadership positions, so you have to validate it from all sides. And you can't just assume, to the point on paper around relationships, you can't just assume a CV, no matter how glorious it could be, means that they're going to be the best person to lead your environment.
Yeah.
I would say, to your statistic, 100% not going to work. Can work.
Yeah.
Pending you've done the work from a people process. We have a 4-step hiring process. The last step is meeting me, and we don't talk about work. We just talk about who they are as people and life. But whether it's a 4-step hiring process to actual getting the job, or a 7-step people strategy, that rigor and foundations on both those examples allow for a really, if anything, clear way to make sure we're getting it right more often than we're not.
Yeah.
But sometimes things don't work.
Yeah.
And sometimes you've got to make a fast call.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to make a call knowing that as much as the person is brilliant, they're maybe not growing with the company of where it needs to get to. And if you've got that process and validation to the point of transparency and being open with people and knowing where they stand, you've got the rigor and foundations of process, and you've also got clear conversations that are there for the people to either take and grow, or sometimes they might look at other avenues too. And that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also recently spoke about the fact that you've restructured your business in the spirit of doing research, restructuring your business.
You really did go deep.
I went deep. Let me tell you, I'm not sitting on this chair and not having one stone not unturned.
Love it.
You spoke about reorganizing or organizationally restructuring your business to remove the kind of shoeboxing that typically the marketing or ad agencies kind of tend to traditionally have. Like, you're a creative, you're in accounts, you're a designer, that's all you do, right? Yep. How did you go about that? Because it's not something people just do every day. There's probably no blueprint for how to do it. So where did you start, and then kind of where did you get to?
Well, quickly, it's still a work in progress.
Great, we love
especially 12 months on.
Yeah.
And there was a few reasons behind it, but the really high-level piece is, to be clear, I believe in hierarchy. Yeah. It's super important for how a cascading, decisions get made, and really important to know how people can grow in their career.
Yeah.
But I don't say that meaning title, just title. What equally we did in restructuring to not have department or skill set led teams, but actually looking now to the point of what we've done is an operating structure, very different to an organizational structure. Yeah. Our operating structure puts the best people to solve the problem based on their skill sets and lived experience. So we see the people. Yeah. The whole person could actually solve a problem better than just a department. And we're limiting ourselves based on other people's lived experience or perspectives to actually solve the problem in really interesting ways. Because we are all people and consumers at the end of the day. Yeah. We're all buying things, which is ultimately the simplicity of our job, is to get people to buy things or adopt things or see things through a different lens, change behaviour. Yeah. That's the job we do. But how do you do that when you just say that's a creative department there, that's the design team, that's the media team. They can only solve those type of problems. Yeah. Yes, they ladder up to, what we do is fundamentally a very connected problem-solving environment. However, the big point of changing that is we got rid of all the layers of what traditional advertising would be. We only have three tiers of hierarchy per se, if you just look at it from an organisational structure. But then we also changed our whole operating structure. What typically is a waterfall effect of strategy into creative, into production, into this, X, Y, Z, whatever, depending on the project and the size. And the times can blow out in so many different ways. But we went from a waterfall effect to pick speed, scale, and smarts in the people that we get to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And those people could be like, for instance, we've had squads with our head of people, which typically wouldn't be in the working day-to-day per se on the work that we create, in an actual problem to solve for the work because of the lived experience and their past life.
Yeah.
Because that's invaluable perspective. But we just don't typically, most traditionally, agencies just won't see it like that or won't deliver on that. So yes, we got rid of some layers in our hierarchy and structure to adopt to a more flat structure, but also really clear on what that growth is. But also our operating structure was the biggest thing. And it's still a work in progress because the pace and agility and the smarts of what our team is able to move at is its biggest strength. But it also comes back to we're a very senior business and we have very senior people. It doesn't mean we don't have junior team members or less experienced team members, I would say. However, we are very senior because partners, clients want problem solved faster. And if you have a waterfall process that takes let's say a 12-week period, that often, sometimes that problem either will become a bigger problem or it might not be the most pressing problem in 12 weeks' time. Because that's the pace of the evolution of the world that we're living in right now. And I think that's been intentionally designed two parts. One, to get away from time-based service models as well, which there's a very real commercial choice around that. But also making sure we're just seeing people to the point of everything that we've spoken about today for their whole lived experience and their life, not just the predominant skill set they've been hired for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I find myself saying all the time is that your skill set isn't unique, it's you. And it's something, a big part of our business is personal branding. Like anyone can do your job. Anyone can do my job. A lot of people are very uncomfortable when I say that because I'm like, anyone can do your job. They can learn what you've got, how you do it, the skills that you have to do it, but no one's you and no one can deliver it the way that you do. No one has a relationship with your clients the way that you do. So it's about taking that kind of human and personal element and playing it back to them or reframing it in a way that works and becomes more human for them. Now, I've heard you talk about imposter syndrome a couple of times now. I know we spoke about tall poppy syndrome. Imposter syndrome is typically something that women are asked about. It's not something that typically men talk about or you ever hear a man bringing it up in conversation, which I could go on an entire tangent about and I'm not going to. You've spoken about imposter syndrome a lot. What has your experience been like with it?
I think from potentially when I last spoke about it, I've sort of gone on a journey with it as well. And it's, in short, it's something that, I think about daily in different ways. Does it affect me as much as it once did? Probably not. But I'd actually call it a bit more now how I've reframed it to myself, let's say my inner child in parts, is it's actually I'm just checking myself a little bit. Which, yes, I'm pretty critical on myself, as I've already shared. But that sense check of myself is not a bad thing either. Now, that typically was part fueled by not realising or appreciating, to the point of the slow clap I mentioned to earlier, what has been built. And the last 12 months, I've done more work on myself than I ever have. And I do an exceptional amount on my own personal self to be the best shape for my team or just for my life in general. However, I think the biggest thing for me in imposter syndrome is it is a true thing. It really exists. Unfortunately, systemically and societally, it's largely pushed into women in general for all the reasons that we're both aware of and I've spoken about pretty extensively before. But I'd say there's a ton of men that aren't vulnerable enough to talk about it, but also probably don't know that there is total differences based on the individuals that feel it in different ways. Now, my relationship with it potentially was age-driven a little bit. All right, like what point do I actually own the fact that my strength is how young I am when I am in, let's say, one of the largest companies in Australia and actually in their boardroom talking about what their plans are over the next 3 years. Why am I in there? Well, I'm in there for a reason. They've asked me to be in there for a reason. They've backed me. One of my biggest backers, and I'm grateful to this day, is Damien Mew, the AIA Insurance CEO. He has backed me based on the belief and accountability of looking people in the eye and saying we're going to deliver X. And he's still our foundation partner that started Bullfrog and still our partner very much today, and we've done some incredible things.
Yeah.
Bullfrog wouldn't be what it is without that support. However, it's through those little moments of confidence building and actually why these people are picking you. And I always ask I'm like, why do these people want to join me? Why do they want to work for me?
Yeah.
It's okay to ask why.
Yeah.
But don't doubt yourself all the way through. But that takes work. I'm working on it every day.
Yeah.
I still ask myself the question when a request comes in to work with a certain level of partner or client. And I'm like, holy shit. But I think it's just that balance of like, I still think it's got something to do for me personally, not for everyone. I've been critical on ourselves versus being a cheerleader for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I guess even in what we've spoken about today to that question, I've sort of done some work because my answer to being my own biggest cheerleader, I would not have probably said 12 months ago.
Yeah, I love that.
Let alone you acknowledging, owning, like sort of sitting through and grimacing through it, but hearing the fact and being appreciative to those recognitions or awards or whatever it might be, is it's okay to be uncomfortable, but it's okay to also own those things too. But I think people just should share about it more often. And whether it's called imposter syndrome for some or actually just sense checking of how I'm looking at it in myself is, have I earned the right? So if I'm being a cheerleader to myself, I have done the work to be there.
Yeah.
I have done more work than most people would know. You have to find confidence in that, but that takes work.
Yeah.
I know the person that I show up today is confident, but I do the work on the person that is doubting me every day.
And it's the work that you do behind closed doors that no one sees, that you don't get the claps
100%.
for, that allows you to enjoy the moments that you do get the claps. I really resonate with that. I think I probably 12 months ago reframed imposter syndrome to be almost like a proof point that I'm heading in the right direction because it's uncomfortable. And for me, like when I'm uncomfortable and there's a discomfort there, it ultimately means that there's growth either around the corner or currently happening, or, you know, there's this uncomfortable tension. I'm like, no, I'm growing, and therefore it's not a comfortable position to be in, which means that I'm in the right spot. But I think that you're right. It takes time and effort to work on yourself to appreciate that. Now, before I kind of want to get into a couple of other questions before we wrap it up, but I know we spoke about it before we came on air, so to speak, about the ad industry. One of the things, as I said at the very beginning, that I loved about what you do is that you are challenging how agencies or professional services are being delivered, or how their teams are built, how they're structured and all of that. And that's a goal that I have within my own business. Where is the ad industry going wrong in your mind?
You know, if you don't mind, like I get your question, but instead of wrong,
okay,
I actually think it's this growth it hasn't realised.
Sure.
So it's a great question, but I also know, like, I'm very critical on what the opportunity could be for the industry. And that's part what is injected everything into Bullfrog. What is wrong is it's not realising that potential fast enough.
Absolutely.
And I think this industry has so many smart people, being independent companies, network companies. Some of the smartest humans in the world are in this industry. But they've got this potential that they could unlock even further. That's actually what I truly believe in.
Yeah.
And I think even to that point of that belief, it is so much that the respect I have for everyone at this industry, I am their biggest cheerleader as much as everyone else. We all have to succeed.
Yeah.
But we do have to, the pace of change and evolution, I think the point of where the opportunity is getting stifled is the stagnancy to make the move. And that's not every business.
No.
But as someone that is lucky enough to know a lot of people at some of the biggest and best and most talented companies in the world in the agency space, and have done the work to get to know these people, their leaders, what are they driving towards, what are they looking to change, what is the role of AI, what is this, what is that, like all these things. It's actually the leaders that are more open to change and actually okay to say, I'm not just going to rest on this is how it's always been done, because just how it's done yesterday doesn't mean it's okay to do it today. And I think that mindset shift is shifting, but I also think that to the point is it's not wrong. It's just wrong of the pace of what it could be delivering and what the potential it could be doing. And I think you're seeing that across the board from a market trend perspective of clients that are, really high level clients building internal teams versus hiring external. That the pace of that movement is projected to grow even substantially in the next few years. Why? Well, maybe because the service offering that was getting delivered wasn't having, one, maybe impact, but B, wasn't measuring up to the expectation. So there's a challenge in that because agencies have eroded trust of clients as well. So let's just invest it internally, extend our headcount, but the balance is based on market pressures, tough climates that we're in right now. All of a sudden then they potentially, and I'm seeing it consistently, we actually can't invest so much in our internal team now, so then we do have to go back out and market. Or we actually need to, a lot of companies, and it's well reported, we need to restructure and let go of a bunch of people to keep sustainable. You've seen Telstra, we need to get rid of 1,000 people. Some of the biggest companies in the world are restructuring to shift to get to the future. They're trying to do it to keep sustainable, which is the toughest part of business, the hardest part. And oftentimes I think it's unfair how many companies, be agencies as well, because there's plenty of redundancies across the landscape, feel like it's not human because they're just not human brands per se, or they're big networks. I think that's unfair. I think no decision at any level of the boardroom isn't done with some level of empathy. It's just the pace of the decision that sometimes is misinterpreted based on care. And I think care is sustainability of a business, not just running it into the ground. And that's a really fine point. I've had my own toughest moments with that. I've been very lucky that hasn't been a big part of our story, but I've still had to make tweaks and changes. So you pointed out, I've still had to restructure to fit business needs or to chase that evolution of what could be. So I think the point is, I think the landscape has been complacent and stagnant. COVID rattled those cages really heavily, and it rattled the cages in the best way to see a rise of independent agencies doing some of the best creative product in the world. But it also, right now, in a really interesting times with really tough market, with clients restricting spends and really looking internally to drive efficiencies more so than externally because they've lost a bit of trust. That is making it really hard for agencies in general to keep sustainable. So now that we're forced to make change, which I actually think is super exciting to see the pace of growth and development of the whole category over the next handful of years, it has to move now. Or else those models won't exist. And we're seeing that already. We're seeing networks fold into each other. We're seeing consolidation across the board. It's the number one conversation in most conversations I'm in is consolidation. And I think that clarity and focus is forcing that on a commercial level, but it's also forcing it on a day-to-day of what the businesses will remain and are they evolving fast enough to do so. But I think it does come back to that point to your question before. We just have to be evolving at the pace of what society is growing. And I think we just got a little bit stagnant. Now, that hasn't been a part of our journey, but there's probably a reason that someone can come into the industry with fresh eyes and grow fast and attract some top-tier talent at the same time. There's a reason to that. But there's also an opportunity to it. But now we're a 4-year-old. We have had some runs on the board. We need to prove our mark and we need to continue to raise the expectations, but we're always going to be evolving. And I think that mindset is in every individual, not just me. And they're the people I look for, is the evolution of the thinking, period. Not just this is how it's always been done. That is my most hated few words.
I couldn't agree more. With that in mind then, what is the biggest opportunity for brands that they're not tapping into?
The biggest opportunity for businesses and brands in general that they're not tapping into, if I was to focus on the expectation of marketing, The expectation of marketing is to grow or cut spend. If we don't grow, we cut spend, but it's only one part of a function of a business. The opportunity is to use every function as a connected business experience. They all work together. They should all work together. Often it's not the case.
Yeah.
The biggest opportunity, and that's not just creativity in business or different thinking, is if you can create a really connected business across all verticals, you can create some pretty smart, wonderful growth. And it won't all be rocket ship growth. That's hard. There's a handful of companies you can do that. But it will be also really sustainable growth. I think that would definitely be one. But also I think often is look at that end consumer and own the story of the relevance of where you show up in their life. Don't think it's more than that, or don't look to others who've done it well and think you can replicate it. It just comes back to own the actual heartland of what you offer as a company and the role you play in people's lives. Because obviously every company is coming to us to drive growth.
Yeah.
Not coming to us to go backwards. And so it's someone that is tasked consistently to grow some of the most incredible businesses and brands, no matter what stage of their life of the business is, they still need to own truly what is their unique selling point. Because you can't be everything to everyone. So I'd actually say focus and double down right now as a brand. Look at every function of the business as a way to drive growth, not just a marketing function to drive growth. And I think often the answers will lie in just that clarity and focus, along with just making sure everything is working as a connected experience.
Yeah, I love that. Last couple of questions. What's one misconception you think people have about you as a business owner? You're like, where do I start?
That's a good one. One misconception. I'm in the foxhole looking at all the things that I remind myself daily. I think the misconception is that I don't know what I'm doing. I don't think that's necessarily so much anymore.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes that's associated to age.
Absolutely.
I do know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I talk in riddles sometimes. I love a story. I'm a storyteller. But I always have a plan for a plan. And that plan is always getting worked on. And the one thing that people, I think the misconception is if you talk about some of the recognised points of being the youngest on that top 50 list, and some of those companies are the biggest networks or agencies in Australia and the world, being the youngest on that list is one part of it. But it's also, you don't get there without knowing enough or doing the work. Yeah. I just think people should not underestimate the amount of work I do. Yeah. Because for the 4 years I've been a student of this industry to learn as much and connect as much as possible. I've learned a shitload. I don't refer to myself as someone that doesn't come from advertising per se. I am very much in advertising. Yeah. I am very much in this industry to change it. And I am very much grateful that I have enough people that believe in me in my day-to-day, be our partners and my team as well, that have enough faith and trust, and the results speak for themselves, that I do know what I'm doing. And I don't say that in an arrogant way. It's as much as just saying you should not underestimate that.
Yeah, I love that. And the last question before... Actually, I have two questions. One, which is a selfish question.
I reckon we could talk all day.
Oh my God, we could literally go for hours. I was literally sitting there being like, maybe we'll have to have a part two.
Part two, watch out.
First question... Well, two questions. First question is a bit more of a selfish question. It wasn't on the list of questions that I prepared or, themes that I wanted to talk about. But it's something that I'm aware of is, you've spoken about your lovely partner, Laura, who, for anyone that doesn't know, obviously is a CEO and very successful in her own right. You are a CEO of a business. Yeah. And you strike me as somebody who works very hard and likely would work at any point he could. You know, there's no like, I don't get this vibe from you that you're like, oh, well, I'm out of the office, I'm done now. Like, you know, sure you have boundaries, absolutely, but you don't strike me as the type of person to kind of, you know, take the opportunities that you've got lightly. How do you manage that at home? Because that's a really difficult situation to be in, where you might have, you know, different schedules, different commitments, different travel schedules, different call times, you know, different needs and wants from various team members and leaders, and different responsibilities within your respective businesses. How do you make time for each other?
It's a good topic in the household at the moment. I think one of my favourite bits of advice wasn't actually advice given to me, but it was actually advice given to Laura from Janine Ellis. Is that your best business partner is the person you pick to spend the rest of your life with. Yeah. If that is people's paths, right? But they are. Because it's always a yin and a yang. Yeah. Now, it's not necessarily common to have two people in one household, not just in a leadership position per se, but two founders in one household. Yeah. That we are very grateful for the companies that we lead and that we have built. We're responsible for a lot of people and making sure they achieve what they want to achieve in their life as well, which we take with it's like the biggest privilege ever. Yeah. But we are always working at trying to protect space for each other. Typically that is dinner time. That's not a lot of time, really, half an hour to eat dinner, maybe an hour tops, because we both love what we do. And it's, as so many people say, is if you can wake up and do what you do and get paid to do it because you love it, that's a pretty great way to be. And often I would say that is the biggest thing I'd say to any founder or thinking of people starting is just start because you know you love it and you're passionate about it. And if it doesn't work out, at least you know, because you probably have something else to fall back on. Yeah. But the biggest skill or learning of anything, if it did not work out, I'd be hiring that person first because they had the courage to do it.
Absolutely.
But to come back to your point, and the question is, we love what we do. Yeah. There is no switch off. Yeah. Because you have an expectation, a burden between the both of us. We've got, you know, well over 50 odd people that we have to look after to make sure there's food on the table. And we take that personally. Yeah. It's why we care. We're both those type of people. Very different operators, totally different. Yeah. We could not work well together, even though we sort of do in different ways. Yeah. But I think that's why as individuals, we're our own people. Yeah. Together, we're a force. And I think we appreciate the fact that it is yin and yang across the journey. And we're in that bit of a conversation at the moment is we can't all push and pull at the same speed at the same time. Yeah. And the biggest part for us is to the point of the details, but it's just we just find and appreciate those moments, and we're getting better at that. But it takes consistent work. Yeah. And we're never going to have it perfect. You know, be the kid conversations and others, and we've just done a massive podcast around that as well. And and even that in itself life's always going to have complexity, but as a partnership, you overcome it together. Yeah. And I think it doesn't matter if it's kids, no kids, or business hard, not hard, or this happened, that happened, something bad in life happened, or something bad in work happened. It is all life, and I've said that always through and through. Yeah. And you just have to make room for all of it. And it takes work.
I think that's probably one of the most important things, right, is like you've got to have both people working on it. And I had this conversation with a friend last night, was like the reason why most partnerships come to an end, whether it's a business relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a friendship, is because someone stops putting in effort, or someone stops working, or someone stops trying as hard as the other person. And I think you just hit the nail on the head there with that. And I feel like that could be an episode in itself. However, we can't sit here for hours as much as I would love to. Last question before we get into the final three. What's your most expensive mistake you've made?
Expensive. Probably making the wrong investments
Okay.
in people.
Yeah.
I'm a people business.
Yeah.
You learn over the journey. You're not going to get it right at the start. And the early potential efficiencies I could have created, I didn't know there were efficiencies at that point in time.
Yeah.
Hindsight and reflection allows you to optimize and look at how you go forward and plan better. And I think as a people business, sometimes you get the wrong mix of people.
Yeah.
And sometimes the busyness catches up with you and you sometimes forget that detail.
Yeah.
Or forget, as you sort of mentioned, the wrong line manager or just the wrong person culturally that doesn't fit. Might fit and have great work, but might not actually fit to get a bunch of people and is having more negative impact than a positive one.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of most of my expense is people in a business context. That is the most, from a P&L, that is the majority of what takes it up. However, I wouldn't say they're mistakes. They're just big, steep learnings.
Yeah.
And I've had steeper ones and I've had little ones too. It really depends, and I think to me they're definitely not mistakes because they were always in the pursuit of achieving our vision. But also as you grow in your role and in life and experience, you learn to make less mistakes or how I'd say sometimes the conditions don't change but doesn't necessarily mean you grow. So what is the next tweak or change to those conditions to allow you to grow? Yeah. It's like a video game, right?
Yeah.
If I get, not that I'm a massive gamer in general, but if I was a kid and I was playing Donkey Kong, the big bad boss that's trying to not let me get through that final level, the conditions aren't changing. I'm just doing it the same way.
Yeah.
So if I don't change the way I'm thinking about it, or I'm not taking the learnings from the past to apply to a present, what do you think is going to be the outcome? You're going to get the same outcome. You just won't go to the next level.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really simple way to think about it.
Yeah.
Is my mistakes are great learnings that I won't make again.
Totally.
Because I am constantly evolving and changing how I get there.
Yeah.
But they can be costly. You just might not recognize it in the moment. But retrospectively, I've had my biggest learnings from making sure I am looking at it that way. And I'm always looking back to look forward, but more focusing on what is forward and what is in the present. Yeah. Because the past is already the past.
Yeah. And I think there's that definition of insanity, which is like doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? Like, I think it's so right. Well, we finish every podcast with 3 questions. They're called quickfire. Don't have to answer them quickly, but the first one is name one brand that first comes top of mind for you.
Uniqlo.
Why?
Accessible, innovative, quality.
Are they a client of yours?
No.
Do you want them to be?
Have worked with them in my old life.
Okay, cool. What is one thing that you think helps keep a business or a brand top of mind?
Entertainment. I think sometimes, myself included, I actually had this conversation with someone this morning in the office. We're very and what I'm most proud of, our strategic rigor around what leads to a great idea is super extensive comparative to the market. And often people wouldn't even know that. However, sometimes you just need to do something entertaining.
Yeah.
And often it actually just comes back to knowing your consumer and audience really well. I actually, to the point is, I think Kik do it exceptionally well.
We had Alice on the podcast.
Superstar.
She's a superstar.
Absolute superstar.
Yeah.
And, that, if anything, sometimes something can be entertaining. And as someone that is in the advertising industry, often entertainment is like, oh, that made me laugh. Isn't that part of the job? Because now I remember it.
Yeah.
I would rather be entertaining than something with real deep thought that is meticulously wrapped together, that is not memorable.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes brands know your audience and your customer.
Yeah.
Think there's so many other layers that leads to a customer buying into a company.
Yeah.
But if they're seeing something through the scattered billions and millions of messages that is now at our disposal, be through our phone, social media, etc., TV, whatever it might be, make it entertaining. Yeah. Make it feel something for someone. I think sometimes it's as simple as that.
Yeah. I also think it's the entertainment that can be unexpected.
Yeah.
And I think a brand that comes to mind for me is Loewe, the premium brand. They did a entire campaign on the fact that people can't pronounce their brand name and made fun of it using like a spelling bee execution, and it was hilarious. It was the first time we've really seen a premium luxury brand execute humour. Yeah. Which I love. Last but not least, I love quotes. I love words. And I will one day have a coffee book table of all the quotes that I've collected from this podcast, because there's been so many great ones.
Killer.
What is a quote that is always top of mind for you? And maybe it's not necessarily a quote, maybe it's just a saying that you like live your life by. But is there something that's kind of top of mind for you?
If nothing changes, nothing changes.
Fair.
Which is a bit, a lot of things we've spoken about today.
Yeah.
In different ways.
Yeah.
But I think often people expect things to change, but they haven't changed themselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's the best note to end it on. Dalton, thank you so much for sitting with me. This will not be the last time, because we need a part 2 for sure, because there are so many questions in here that I have not got to. I really appreciate you being so generous with your time and your knowledge and your journey so far. And I know that the people listening to this will get so much out of it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing.
Before you go, help us grow and reach more people by hitting the subscribe button and leaving us a review. You can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at topofmind.pod.